Hi, and welcome to Trust and Obey with Chuck Frank. This is a Saturday Chuck-in, and we're going to do something a little different. This Chuck-in is called Don't Believe Him Not. And what's different about this? Well, Friday, New York Times guy named Ezra Klein put out a video which was an assessment of the Trump first 2 weeks, and it was a failing report card. And so I thought, well, you know what? We can't let that stand. So I'm going to give response, and Ezra's going to get a chance to talk, and then I'm going to get a chance to respond, and we're going to have some fun with this. All right? And pay attention to all the times you hear, don't believe him, because Ezra is at his most manipulative. All right. I don't want to color this. Let's hear from Ezra.
Weeks of the second Trump administration. Go back and listen to what Steve Bannon told PBS's Frontline in 2019.
The opposition party is the media. And the media can only, because they're dumb and they're lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. All we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with three things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover. But we got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start, it's got to hammer. It's got muzzle velocity.
Muzzle velocity. Bannon's insight there is real. Focus is a fundamental substance of democracy. It is particularly the substance of opposition. People largely learn of what the government is doing through the media. So if you overwhelm the media...
A record-setting number of executive orders.
Everybody pardons. Violence, non-violence.
Including assaulting police officers.
Birthright citizenship.
We live in unprecedented times right now.
If you keep it moving from one thing to the next...
So far, so good.
Is this legal?
If you give it too many places it needs to look.
You've never been deported before?
You got to fill.
All at once.
All federal grants and loans will be halted.
Look, there is a purge happening.
Frankly, unprecedented in its nature.
Guantanamo.
DEI.
The Gulf of America.
No coherent opposition can really emerge. It is hard to even think coherently. Donald Trump's first 2 weeks in the White House have followed Bannon's strategy like a script. The flood is a point. The overwhelm is a point. The message wasn't in any one executive order or announcement. It was in the cumulative effect of all of them. The sense that this is Trump's country now. It is his government now. It follows his will. It does what he wants. That he is limitless. If he says that birthright citizenship is over, then it's over.
Wow, Ezra, shame on you. Well, let's start with some of the mega themes, right? One is that Trump is overwhelming the media. That's what you do when you don't want people to find out what's going on. Newsflash. The mainstream media, the legacy media, the lying legacy media is definitely overwhelmed because they can't get to a group narrative from their corporate masters that's going to cover this. Meanwhile, the new media, the digital media that is replacing the legacy media, is not overwhelmed in the least. It is a dynamic environment where people are sharing, and 80% of the country is absolutely loving it because they're not hearing lies. They're not hearing mockingbird nonsense. So let's get to the mockingbird nonsense, because a big part of that message is fear porn in the images they choose, and fear porn in the words that they repeat. So let's cue up. First of all, don't believe him. Pay attention to how many times you're going to hear that in this brief video. He titled this video, Don't Believe Him. Don't believe what your eyes are seeing, right? And so we kick off with images of Steve Bannon, who is definitely a boogeyman to the left, and not only a boogeyman, but an ex-veteran, and he's talking about muzzle velocity. In fact, they cue him to repeat that word, muzzle velocity because it's scary, right? It's about guns. It's analogous to violence. It's analogous to right-wing and white supremacists, of which none of these people have ever met. I'm from Kentucky. I've never met one. I don't know what the heck they're talking about. So, but here's what muzzle velocity, this is why Ezra is harping on it, because everything's going too fast. And Bannon is saying, listen, muzzle velocity is about speed, the speed at which the bullet comes out and hits its target. And Trump is hitting multiple targets every single day. And here's another newsflash. This is the pace for the next 4 years. It is not the pace for just 2 weeks. So you better get used to it. Since you did the video, they took down the sign out front of USAID. Okay? They're not slowing down. So when you say that it's hard for you to even think coherently, I get that. Coherence for the left is the opposite of common sense, which is now ruling the day. But for 4 years, we had Crazy Town under Biden, and the left had no problem with all of the insanity, which was actually the inversion of the truth, the inversion of any kind of moral sense, the inversion of the Constitution, all of it. But now Ezra is saying it's hard to even think coherently because Trump's going too fast and we can't get ahead of it with a monolithic media meme. So what's going on here when they are trying to create fear porn for you? Well, Elon doing the Nazi salute, scary gun analogies, big pictures of Steve Bannon's face, J6 violence, billy clubs, the Gulf of America. Even the Gulf of America is fear porn to the left. If he can rename the Gulf of Mexico, what else could he do? Well, we're going to find out. And wow, every day we find out a lot. So the sign's been taken down outside of the major funding arm for all the surreptitious nonsense. And then here's the next scary thing. This is Trump's country now. Trump's taking over. Well, guess what? If you're not living in a cave in a dark blue city, the newsflash is that 80% of Americans are absolutely loving this. So you're darn tootin', it's Trump's country now. And he was given a mandate at the polls, even though there was massive cheating, the 80% overwhelmed everything. And then on top of it, here's another reason for the fear porn. Trump's taking over, that's fear porn. Bobby Kennedy, pretty good so far, right? That's fear porn because Bobby defected and Bobby was royalty. And if royalty goes to the other side, they must be destroyed. And then the use of words like purge and purging. Okay, this again is an overtone of Nazism, Kristallnacht. You know, all of these things create fear because Ezra's not trying to change the minds of MAGA with this. This is all a huge warning to the Democratic Party that Bobby defected, Tulsi defected, but you better not defect because if you do, you're going to be subject to an insane king. Let's see what else Ezra wants to share with us.
Or so he wants you to think. In Trump's first term, people said, don't normalize him. In a second, though, the task, I think, is a little bit clearer. Don't believe him. Because Trump knows the power of marketing, the power of belief. If you make people believe something is true, you make it likelier that it becomes true. He clawed his way back to great wealth by playing a fearsome billionaire on TV. He remade himself as a winner after the 2020 election by refusing to admit he had ever lost. The American presidency is a limited office, but Trump has never wanted to be president. What he's always wanted to be is king. And his plan this time is to first play king on TV. If we believe he is already king, if we believe he already has all that power, we'll be likelier to let him govern as a king. We will then give him that power. Don't believe him.
All right. Well, we got two don't believe hims in this section, and that's because Ezra is preaching from the Saul Alinsky Bible. Okay? So what does that mean? The left's high priest is Saul Alinsky, and this is what he taught, and this is how they play. This is their whole game in terms of the legacy media. Saul said, repeat a lie loudly and shamelessly again and again. Your audience will assume that you have more shame than to keep repeating it so boldly, and will eventually submit and accept it as true. I want to say it again because this is the rest of Ezra's video. Repeat a lie loudly and shamelessly again and again. Your audience will assume that you would have more shame than to keep repeating it so boldly, and will eventually submit and accept it as true. So what are you talking about, Chuck? All right, let's talk about the big lies Ezra's bringing up in this section. First of all, their favorite, the 2020 election. The legacy media christened that the big lie, right? Trump wouldn't accept. That's what Ezra's saying. Well, there might be a reason for that, Ezra. It might be that Trump has all the receipts. Do you remember the creation of Space Force? And all you guys were laughing and laughing and laughing. What's Trump going to do? Does he think he's going to Mars? No. Trump knew there was going to be a stolen election, and he made sure that he would have all the cyber receipts, and he has them. And guess what? Today, over 70% of Americans believe the results of the 2020 election were fraudulent. But you guys keep telling the lie. Let's go to your next lie, one of your favorites. J6 Fedsurrection was a riot and an insurrection fomented by Trump in which 6 police officers were killed. Now we got to see Saul Alinsky on this one. 6 police officers killed? That's a lie. No police officers were killed during the Fedsurrection. There were 2 people who were trying to see the White House who were killed. One woman was having a cardiac arrest while police beat her. And the second was Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed veteran who was shot in the neck. Okay, those are the truth. No police officer was killed, but a la Saul Alinsky, you are repeating it over and over and over again. And that's a funny thing, because nobody believes that the Dems back the blue. But when we talk about J6, oh my gosh, they beat we're all about backing the blue. No, you're the party that defunded the police. And before that, you're the party that created the 2020 Summer of Fun. So all of that money came from USAID, and we're just finding that out now, that you funded BLM, that you funded the leaders of BLM buying very large homes, multiple homes in Los Angeles. So here's some more lies from Ezra. Trump has always wanted to be king. I followed Trump since 2015. I have never, ever heard him say he wants to be king. He's playing a king on TV. Haven't seen that either. And Ezra's admonishment to his base is, don't believe that he is king. This is more fear porn. You're going to get an evil king, and he is going to rule over you like a tyrant. This is all manipulation of, let's say, reasonable Democrats on the left who are seeing things, seeing improvements, and saying, you know what? I think we're going to move to the center. We're not going to move center right, but we're at least going to move for the center. And what does that leave Ezra? It leaves him a complete nut house to try to work with. So that's not going to work. Let's hear what else Ezra has to say.
Trump has real powers, but they are the powers of the presidency, the powers Joe Biden had, the powers Barack Obama had. The pardon power is vast and unrestricted, and so he could indeed pardon the January 6th rioters. Federal security protection is under the discretion of the executive branch. And so, yes, Trump could remove protection from Anthony Fauci and Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and Mark Milley, and even Brian Hook, this largely unknown former State Department official who's under threat from Iran, who even donated time to Trump's transition team.
I would be very happy to put President Trump's record in the Middle East against any other president.
All of this, it was an act of astonishing cruelty and callousness. This from a man who nearly died by an assassin's bullet months ago. As much as anything ever has been, this, to me, this was an X-ray of the smallness of Trump's soul.
Brian Hook is the X-ray of the smallness of Trump's soul. Wow. All right, let's pull this apart. Look, Trump has 3 titles as president, and none of them are king. The first title is he's the chief executive. The second title is he's the chief magistrate. And his third title is commander-in-chief over the military. Okay? And so far, he has not stepped out of bounds on any of those 3 titles. And he is exercising them fully. Now, let's take a look at the X-ray of the smallness of Trump's soul. He stopped DEI. Okay, flyover country thinks that's a good thing. MAGA thinks that's a good thing. We're going to live for 4 years as that is a good thing. Ending racism in schools and government. Saving young kids from mutilation for profit. Okay, removing men from girls' sports, locker rooms, and restrooms. Releasing all J6 political prisoners. Ending the tax on Social Security. Going immediately to North Carolina. Going immediately to Pacific Palisades. And sending J.D. Vance to East Palestine, Ohio. Getting the hostages released from Hamas day 1. Meeting with the Gold Star families who lost 13 loved ones in the debacle leaving Afghanistan. Not a bad 2 weeks in terms of the compassion rating. And this is not even half of what was done, Ezra. I think that's a small claim about the smallness of Trump's soul. Let's see what else you have to say.
Soul. But it was an act that was within his official power. But the president cannot rewrite the Constitution. Within days, his birthright citizenship order was frozen by a judge, by a Reagan appointee, who told Trump's lawyers, "I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar would state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles my mind." Then, a judge froze Trump's spending freeze. He froze it even before it went into full effect. And shortly thereafter, the Trump administration rescinded the entire order, in part to avoid a court case that it seemed pretty clear they would lose. What Bannon wanted, what the Trump administration wants, is to keep everything moving fast.
Muzzle velocity.
If you're always consumed by the next outrage, you can't look closely at the last one. Then the impression of Trump's power remains, and the fact that he keeps stepping on rakes is missed. The projection of strength obscures the reality of weakness. Don't believe him. You can see this.
Oh, you got another don't believe him, and you got another muzzle velocity. Are these repeats of these things? Are they having an impact on you? Well, if you're a blue person, they are. If you're a New York Times reader, you're like snapping your head every time you hear those things. You're falling right in step. But here's the thing. Muzzle velocity is a manipulative term. It's meant to scare the Democrats that white supremacy is coming in the face of Steve Bannon, that we have to get rid of all these guns because it's what allows these people to resist. And guess what? He's not slowing down. He's not getting into the lawfare quicksand with you folks because you taught him that lesson well. Good job. No slowing down. Now, let's talk about your buddy, the judge, who had his mind boggled by Trump going after birthright citizenship. So this is a 14th Amendment issue, okay? And it has to do with jurisdiction. So here we go. The 14th Amendment has always excluded from birthright citizenship persons who were born in the United States but not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What the heck does that mean? It means among the categories of individuals born in the United States and not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, the privilege of United States citizenship does not automatically extend to persons born in the United States. Shocker. Here's number one. When that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States, and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. And category two, when the person's mother's presence in the United States program or visiting on a student, work, or tourist visa, and the father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. Now, here's where the left will be flip-flopping back and forth. This is going to end up at the Supreme Court because reasonable people are going to say that people who cross the border, thanks to the Biden regime, were not legally in this country. And Dems are going to go, oh, yes, they were. Even if they weren't processed, they're legally here. They have standing. They have jurisdiction. Well, reasonable people would say that's not true. There are legal ways to immigrate to the United States, and there are illegal ways. And Biden let in 15 million illegals. And now the wimpy Supreme Court, I exclude Clarence Thomas from that, maybe Gorsuch, but the rest of them are working at the Waffle House. We don't know what they'll say, but I would think that by the time this gets to the Supreme Court, Trump's momentum, his muzzle velocity, is going to provide some spine to the rest of the Supreme Court that we might eke out a majority on this birthright citizenship issue. Okay? Then here's a great one from Ezra. Trump keeps stepping on rakes. So I can think of two rakes. One was Matt Gaetz. He never should have backed off that. But normally when Trump does something like that, he has a plan for Matt Gaetz. And who knows what it might be. I could engage in some fear porn. How about special prosecutor? Hey, who knows? Anyway, I don't see Trump stepping on rakes. Yes, he pulled back an order, and but that was no big deal. He cleaned it up. And as far as I can see, he's been dancing through the Biden minefield that was left for him like Baryshnikov. He's actually dancing with the stars of global power broking and governance. Do you see what happens when he goes to Mar-a-Lago? The left says, oh, he's not working hard. How do you say that? You see him playing some golf? The guy sleeps 3 hours a night. He's all over the place. And when he's at Mar-a-Lago, world leaders are coming there. There's less scrutiny when they come there. And he's cutting deals with all of them. And by the way, did you happen to see him on Zoom at the World Economic Forum? And did you see all the masters of the universe sucking up to him on Zoom? I don't know. I don't know where all these rakes are you're talking about. This guy, he's killing it. Let's see what else Ezra wants to claim.
This a few ways. Is Trump playing a part? Is he making a bet, or is he triggering a crisis? Those, I think, are the options. And I'm not certain that even he knows the answer. Trump has always been an improviser. But if you take it as a bet, a calculation, then here is a bet he's making. Maybe this Supreme Court, stocked with his appointees, gives him powers no peacetime president has ever possessed. Perhaps all this becomes legal now that he has asserted its legality. It's not impossible to imagine that bet paying off for him. So what if the bet fails? What if Trump's arrogations of power are soundly rejected by the courts? Then comes a question of constitutional crisis. Does he just ignore the court's ruling? To do that would be to attempt a kind of coup. I wonder if they have the stomach for that. The withdrawal of the OMB order, to me, suggests they don't. Because bravado aside, Trump's political capital is thin. Gallup has Trump's approval rating at 47%. That is about 10 points beneath Joe Biden in January of 2021. Both in his first and his second terms, he entered office with approval ratings below that of any other president in the modern era. And so I thought these defenses of Trump's firings were telling.
It is the belief of this White House and the White House counsel's office that the president was within his executive authority to do that.
The law says he's supposed to give you 30 days notice. He didn't do that. Do you think he violated the law?
Well, technically, yeah.
Do you believe that it's legal?
By definition, it's his administration. They work for him at the pleasure of the president. And if it's illegal, it should be legal.
So then ask yourself, why isn't Trump trying to make it legal? There is a reason Trump is doing all this through executive orders rather than submitting these same directives as legislation to pass through Congress. A more powerful executive could convince Congress to eliminate the spending he opposes, or to reform the civil service to give him the powers of hiring and firing that he seeks. And there's a good reason to do that. To write these changes into legislation would make them both more durable and would allow him to argue their merits in a more strategic way. He would be reforming the entire system. But Republicans at the moment, they have only a 3-seat edge in the House, smallest majority since the Great Depression. They have a 53-seat majority in the Senate. Trump is obviously doing nothing to reach out to Democrats. If Trump tried to pass this agenda as legislation, it would fail. And that would make Trump look weak. And Trump doesn't want to look weak. He remembers John McCain humiliating him in his first term by casting the deciding vote against Obamacare repeal. No. Congress is a place where you can lose. That is a tension at the heart of Trump's whole strategy.
Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders.
Trump is acting like a king because he's too weak to govern like a president.
With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense.
Wow, Ezra, you are laying it on thick. Trump is acting like a king because he can't govern as a president. And Trump's afraid to go to Congress because Congress is a place where you can lose. That's kind of oversimplifying. If you want to oversimplify, you could say Congress is a place full of losers, like John McCain, who was a veteran and a prisoner of war, and he should be feted for that. But the skullduggery he did in the Senate, no, he doesn't get an excuse for that. So let's take a look. Ezra says a president with real power would compel Congress instead of writing executive orders. All right, well, if that's the truth, how do you explain Obama signing 276 executive orders? And how about Biden signing 162 executive orders? And Trump so far has signed 56. So the question here is not whether or not Trump is operating as a king. It's going to Congress versus muzzle velocity. He's not going to Congress because it slows everything down. They can't even get 10 cabinet members approved in 3 weeks. I mean, it's despicable. Biden, they could move things through Congress easily because they were attaching payola for Ukraine as a part of every deal because both sides of the aisle were on the take, okay? That's why they go to Congress. Trump is writing executive orders because he refuses to be slowed down. And Ezra, you know what? This scrutiny that you're applying to Trump is mostly fiction, but there's real things that you were absolutely silent on. How about when Obama had SEAL Team 6 killed and then flew billions in hush money in cash at night on unmarked jets to Iran? Where were you, Ezra? And all the Biden skullduggery and embarrassing behavior at all the G conferences around the world. Trump has the entire globe coming to kiss his ring. He is being magnanimous to world leaders who believed he was gone from the world stage while they were sucking up to the Biden regime because it was corrupt and easy to manipulate. Wow, Ezra. And then let's talk about Trump's approval rating. The manipulation of all these polls, along with the release of your video, is again what Americans are tired of. Every single one is 47%. Trump's approval rating is only 47%. So let's take the poll that was given to people living in New York City. Trump's approval rating among people who live in New York City, the left of the left, the blue of the blue, is 40%. 40% in New York City. That means it's at least 80% in all of the non-dark blue urban areas of the country. 80% approval rating, Ezra. And guess what? We are tired of you guys manipulating all this information. And Google, you better knock it off because they're going to come after you. All right. Trump is calling this the revolution of common sense. A much better meme than don't believe him or they have no plan or it's embarrassing. Actually, Ezra, you're trying to Alinsky your base with huge lies that defy what everyone is seeing daily. And here's what they're seeing: confidence in adult governance. Let's see what Ezra has to say.
This flurry of activity, it's meant to suggest the existence of a plan. But the closer you look, even at this first 2 weeks, the less true it seems. They're scrambling and flailing already. They're leaking against each other in the press already. We learned that the OMB directive was drafted reportedly without the input or oversight of key Trump officials. It didn't go through the proper approval process, an administration official told the Washington Post. For that to be the process and product of such a sweeping signature initiative in the second week of a president's second term, it's embarrassing. But it's not just a spending freeze. The Trump administration is waging an immediate war on the bureaucracy, trying to replace the deep state they believe hampered them in the first term. And a big part of this project seems to have been outsourced to Elon Musk, who's bringing the tactics he used at Twitter to the federal government.
We're about 20% of the original size.
So 80% left?
Yes.
He has longtime aides now at the Office of Personnel Management, and the email that got sent out to nearly all federal employees even reused the subject line of the email he sent out to Twitter employees after the acquisition. A fork in the road. It's a kind of bragging. Elon wants he wants everybody to know it was him. The email offered millions of civil servants a backdoor buyout, agree to resign, and in theory, at least, you can collect your paycheck and benefits until the end of September without doing any work. The Washington Post reported that the email blindsided many in the Trump administration who would normally have consulted on a notice like that. It blindsided many of the people who are going to have to run these agencies that are now going to be dotted by resignations. I suspect Musk thinks of the federal workforce as this huge mass of woke and largely useless ideologues. For most federal workers, they have very little to do with politics.
Wow. Ezra, you got to get some masonry tools to lay this stuff on thick enough. Most federal workers have very little to do with politics. Man, that's like a laugh line. I wish we had some canned laughter for that. Okay? So here's a little stat for you, Ezra. Election contributions from the Federal Employees Union were 98% for Democrats. And Trump's making an assumption that these are a bunch of woke losers. Let's see, for the last 4 years, they didn't come to work. The agreement was they would come 1 day a week, and most of them did not do that. And we saw the results, okay? The country was circling the bowl. The constitutional republic was nearly done. And a lot of that is from the biased weight of all these federal employees. And that's why Trump is scraping them off. And now, what about Elon? Elon, you said, he cut 80% of the workforce at Twitter and his stockholders. What about his stockholders? Well, his heavy investors and Saudi Arabia's richest man, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, they're ecstatic over him cutting 80% of the workforce. And you say Twitter's running horribly? The prince believes that X is worth more than twice what Elon paid for it. Come on, Ezra, you can do better than this. I mean, even Saul wouldn't attempt this kind of nonsense. It's too easy to disprove. Let's go on. Let's find some better footing for Ezra.
About 16% of them work in healthcare. These are nurses and doctors who work for the Veterans Affairs Department. How many of them does Musk want to lose? How many primary care doctors treating veterans is he hoping take a buyout? Twitter worked terribly after Musk's takeover. It had these frequent outages and bugs, but its outages are not a national scandal. When VA healthcare degrades, it is a national scandal.
Most of what we're talking about here is a group text service at scale. Like, how many people are really needed for that, you know?
What Trump wants you to see in all this activity is command. What is really in all this activity is chaos. They have convinced themselves that speed and force is a strategy unto itself, that it is, in a sense, a replacement for an actual strategy, for thinking and talking things through, for consultation, for planning things out. Don't believe them.
Well, here you see another don't believe them. You should be fully scared by now. And we're going to the more compassionate side of Ezra, representing the party who cares. And Ezra is worried about the quality of health care for veterans at the VA. I'm sure he's invested a great deal of caring time on the subject. You could look it up and see how many pro-VA and concerned VA articles Ezra's captained. Let me tell you, care at the VA sucks. It's been horrendous for years because people like Ezra absolutely do not care. The majority of people do not care. Nobody cares, especially Ezra. He also says X is running horribly, and it's the single most dominant news/free speech platform in the world. Unlike the New York Times, which requires secret taxpayer donations from USAID. by the way, that's been cut off. So, not command, but chaos is what Ezra is saying. And all of these Trump people were blindsided. I don't see any evidence of that. What that is Biden inversion syndrome. Okay, OIS. Trump is in command and the left-wing media is in a state of chaos because reasonable Democrats are moving with Bobby Kennedy to Trump's big tent. They are tired of being with the party of nut jobs, and it's evidenced by the DNC officer elections last week. Check them out on YouTube. They're unbelievable. All right, Ezra.
I had a conversation a couple months ago with someone who knows how the federal government works about as well as anyone alive. And I asked him what would worry him most if he saw Trump doing it. What he said was he would worry most if Trump went slowly. If he began his term by doing things that made him more popular, that made his opposition weaker and more confused. If he worked by stealth, if he tried to build strength for the midterms while slowly expanding his powers and chipping away at the state in the places where it was weakest, where people couldn't really see him doing it. But Trump didn't do any of that. Instead,
muzzle velocity.
And so the opposition to Trump, which seemed so listless and absent after the election, now it's beginning to rouse itself. There's a subreddit for federal employees where one of the top posts reads, "This non-buyout really seems to have backfired. I'll be honest, before that email went out, I was looking for any way to get out of this fresh hell. But now I'm fired up to make these goons as frustrated as possible." As I write this, it's been upvoted more than 39,000 times, and civil servant after civil servant is echoing the initial sentiment. In Iowa this week, Democrats flipped a state Senate seat in a district that Trump had won easily in 2024. The attempted spending freeze gave Democrats their voice back as they zeroed in on the popular programs Trump had imperiled. Trump isn't building support here, he's losing it. Trump isn't fracturing his opposition, he's finally uniting it. This is the weakness of the strategy that Bannon proposed and that Trump is following. It is a strategy that forces you into overreach. To keep the zone flooded, you have to keep acting. You have to keep moving. You have to keep creating new cycles of outrage or fear to keep the media and the opposition overwhelmed. But then you overwhelm yourself. They are flooding their own zone.
So, Ezra, here's some breaking news since you flooded the zone with this video. The judge you referred to that was stopping the buyout, the second judge has overruled him Friday night after 8 o'clock. And that evening, they're reporting over 40,000 federal workers have taken the buyout already. So, wow, things are moving fast. That's what you call muzzle velocity. So I'm more interested in this government expert who knows more than anyone else in the world. Really? And you have a guy who can tell you more about how our government operates than anybody else, but you won't use his name. Come on, that's heavy, heavy source. Who is it? Norm Eisen? I mean, come on. You got to help us a little here. This guy's giving us this kind of information. So, I'm good friends with the Tooth Fairy. And she told me that she was having a conversation with her sister, the Truth Fairy, who told her that Democrats believe, once again, that lawfare will win the day. Not kidding. Lawfare will win the day. It didn't when they stole the 2020 election. It didn't when they planned, scripted, pipe-bombed, and Disneyfied the January 6th Fedsurrection, thanks Nancy, and their plan to put Trump in jail for 300 to 700 years and ruin his family and his businesses. Honestly, Ezra, how did that work out? Please be objective. Oh, and did I mention all of the three-letter agencies that tried to assassinate Trump in Pennsylvania? They only managed to kill a heroic first responder trying to save his family and a confused young man under CIA influence. This is why Trump is stripping things down to the bone. And now for the word of the day in this section from Ezra. Slowly, slowly. His expert says he'd be afraid if Trump slowed things down. Nice manipulation. Nobody's taken the tip. Trump is going to keep the muzzle velocity fast and furious. And that is going to be the tempo for the next 4 years. So you can forget about slowly. All right? Begging all the influencers to slow Trump down. Your only plan is to use lawfare. And say hello to my little friend, Mike Davis. That's why that plan is not going to work. So Trump is losing support. No, he's not. He's not even losing it in New York City. Trump is uniting the opposition. No, he's not. That's why you guys decided to do this video, because the opposition is slowly, glacially moving towards the center. And muzzle velocity is flooding their own zone. There is absolutely no evidence of that. Okay, this is your last shot, Ezra. Please make it compelling.
Trump sees his own fork in the road coming. He may believe he's a power he is claiming. That would be a mistake on his part. It would be a self-deception that could doom his presidency. But the real threat is if he convinces the rest of us to believe he has power he does not have. The first 2 weeks of his presidency have not shown his strength. He is trying to overwhelm you. He is trying to keep you off balance. He is trying to convince you of something that isn't true. Don't believe him.
Wow. Well, Ezra, that was your final and number 5. Don't believe him. So the first 2 weeks of Trump's presidency have not shown his strength. You better call Saul, Ezra, because nobody can make that lie fly. Nobody would believe it. You can't walk into any bodega, grocery store, anywhere and say, you know what? Trump is looking completely weak in these first 2 weeks. You don't even believe it. Trump is trying to convince you of something that is not true. This is the Alinsky claim. Dems always accuse others of what they are doing themselves. Ezra is trying to convince you of something that is not true. Ezra was silent for 3.5 years of Biden's senility. Here's the truth. The Dems are done, and the mainstream media is over. And the shame of this is for Ezra, because Ezra's a talented, handsome, educated man from the Gavin Newsom School of Honesty and Casual Attire. Ezra, the dike is breaking. Reasonable Dems are following Tulsi, Bobby Kay, et al. To the center. You will be left with an empty dike. But I'm going to be praying for you, Ezra, praying that you have an epiphany and finally realize there is no future in lying to the American people. They've had enough of lying. And just one more thing. Does this look to you like an evil king or a man with a small soul, as you say? Well, not to America, and not to all those smiling girls, totally comfortable, appreciative, and at ease with the most powerful man in the world, looking and acting like their grandfather and handing out pens. You just can't make it up. You guys will never keep up with President Trump. Look, every single morning, there are more wonderful things happening in the rebuild of the constitutional republic, the United States of America. And God's mercies are new every morning. We're praying for you, Ezra. And God bless everybody who sees this and the new Jerusalem.